is going on, guys? Welcome to the Wednesday night live stream. Today is all about Polyp Extension. We have Dmitry from Treasure Corals on. How you doing?
Good. My polyps are starting to extend.
Perfect. They're right on point today. So you grow, you sell corals, you have pretty tanks. You are definitely in for the Polyp Extension train as well. I know most of us reefers is something we love, something we strive for. It's funny that so many of us tend to learn to love the sticks and these little hard corals, but yet we want our tiny bit of movement in Polyp Extension because it makes us happy. So I figured it'd be a fun topic for today.
I agree. Please.
Yep. So I don't know. I guess just starting off, how important is Polyp Extension to you? Is it something that makes you happy? Do you see it as a sign of coral health? Like, what's your initial kind of thoughts? Do you strive for in your tanks?
So it does make me very happy to see
Agreed.
polyp, and the longer they are, the happier. I think it's proportional to my happiness.
The happiness scale that they're retracted are out. Yeah.
Yes. And my frustration is inverse correlated to the polyp extension. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's in other people's aquariums that I see the exemplary polyp extension that I'm yearning for myself.
Yeah, that's fair. Is yours in your tanks? Do you have any corals or extra polypi, I guess, or extra long polyps? Is there any like standouts in your mind?
Yeah. So, for example, Marvin the Martian is the first thing that comes up
Yeah.
because I've never seen Marvin the Martian. Like, if you have Marvin the Martian that's closed off,
Mhm.
you're probably doing something wrong and it's dead, right? So, like,
That's
I've
fair.
never seen it half extended. Like, he's a big extender right there. But and I think back in the day, Millipora, for example, was a huge one again because they are very famous for very long, wavy polyp extension.
Mhm.
However, in the hobby lately, I don't know about you guys in Calgary or British Columbia, like on the West Coast, but here I'm hard pressed to see any Millipora anywhere. Like, the only ones I see is like when somebody brings it wild from somebody who just cut it up, and then most of the time it's not there next time I come visit.
Really? I wonder why. I've
I don't know.
Well, hopefully they're not too hard to find because my main goal of the new tank is going to be very milli heavy. So I will let you know on this in a few months. But
Yeah.
I'm going to be on the hunt for as many different cool millies as I can find coming up. Shelly, thanks for the super chat. Don't forget the like button. I agree. Appreciate it.
Very nice.
I know.
Yeah.
So
So sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say Marvin the Martian is definitely a fuzzy one. That one's always out. I have one right beside a torch coral. And part of it's getting stung and dying back a little bit, but the polyps are still unhappy aside from that. So it's definitely a happy guy. That one and the Montipora, I think it's Montipora stellata. That one is crazy polypy too.
Yes, but I don't even think about it this way,
That's
like
fair.
the top stellata kind of thing, or um,
I believe it's called
it,
stellata, but it's very
yeah,
fuzzy. Like it looks
yeah,
like the
it's
skin
fuzzy,
is
but it's
moving in the
short.
wind.
It is pretty short. Like Marvin the
Yeah.
Martian is just exemplary when it comes to like the length of it.
Hmm.
Same as Millipora.
Yeah.
The one that I think is a telltale sign is the forest fire digitata. Like
Mm.
that one, I've seen it in some people's tanks. Like if it detracts, like most likely it's going to be dying because a lot of corals actually can have their polyps in and
Mm.
still thrive for years. But like if forest fire has them it's probably going to be dead in my opinion, in a couple of months at most.
You know what? My water box, I put some
Yeah.
of that in there, and it was never happy. It never thrived. It was never crazy polypy. I don't know why. I've had another tanks and it's been awesome, but my one tank, nope, nothing. But yeah,
um,
that one's a
i'll
mystery.
I'll even give you one where I've done a video a few maybe a couple of years ago where we did a tour of an aquarium store, and that system had multiple aquariums in one water system. So basically, the same water parameters, same chemistry,
Hmm.
same person looking after it, and in one aquarium it was open, and it was
Yeah.
all came from the same mother colony. So it's not like two different strains.
Yeah.
And in another one it would always be closed, and even the owner couldn't really figure out what was going on. So
That is
um,
crazy. Was it similar lighting and flow in the tanks as well, or it's the only wild card that comes to
yes,
mind? Yeah.
Yes, it was. Now, what I've discovered, because I have multiple systems, so the system behind me is kind of my display tank, but I also have
Mm.
a farm. And in my farm, my forest fires are phenomenal. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I've never seen anything bushier. Like, it's great, and it's under strong light, strong flow. So those are not necessarily the differentiating factor.
Mm.
However, when the tank was just starting out, I would take that same coral and I would be bringing it here. It's the same water parameters, same lighting, same flow,
Yeah.
and yet it will close off almost immediately. It's as if there's something else in the water that's present or not present
Mm.
that triggers it this way. And I'm really curious what that could be.
That's interesting. Do you think it is potentially like, a certain trace element that it needs that it's not happy without it or something along those lines? Like any guesses of what do you think it would be?
Well, like trace element, I don't know how well they can kind of go, oh, you're like, I get about the alkalinity.
Hmm.
Like alkalinity, I'm
Yeah.
sure they can kind of feel it right away. And I don't know how the corals feel in first place,
They
but
shiver like
they
that.
kind of will get shocked, right? Because of the acidity or a buffer of some sort. But in
Hmm.
terms of, knowing within hours that certain parameter is just low, I don't know. Maybe they have some sort of a taste for the water, same way as when we drink or eat something is like, oh, this is good or this is bad.
Hmm.
Maybe, or maybe it's organic, like or like bacteria almost related.
Yeah.
Like that would be the whole other angle that I would think of.
Yeah, that
Or
actually that could make sense too. But yeah, it's a weird one, especially when the tanks are all connected, because it takes out a lot of those variables.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I in my farm I have three aquariums plumbed in,
Hmm.
and I can tell you, like when I started this out, like adding more aquariums, a good friend of mine told me that every one of them is going to be different, and they still are very different. Like the type of algae that would grow on the glass or on the floor, the different nuisances, different just way the corals react. It's all different, even in the same water chemistry, which is kind of crazy if you think about it.
It really is.
Yeah.
Now, just since we're on the Nemesis coral thing, do you have any corals that just refuse to be happy in your systems?
Well, for when I started out the farm, which was I want to say about 3, 4 years ago,
Yeah.
it was a new tank, and almost all of the Acropora, like I struggled for the first 6 months. It was just not like being able to dial it in. So I would just say everything.
Hmm.
But right now, I've never kept. What's that fancy new hotness? The thin ones that
Oh,
everybody's talking about.
the the Malaysian, whatever they are. Mind
Yeah, yeah,
blanking.
yeah. That's the one that you look
That's not
at it on it.
Satosa. What are they called?
No,
Seri
yeah,
Stylo? No.
no, no, no.
Anyways, we know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm sure your viewers are gonna type it in
Yeah.
the comments shortly. But that's the one that First of all, I think is just too expensive for me to even consider. But like, I'm
Yeah.
sure I would
Special
be
Etta.
able to. Special ladder, that's correct. So
Yeah.
yes, so those things I think are crazy, and probably that would be very hard.
Hmm.
In terms of something that I know I would introduce, so I think this is actually a very good question, because I think it changes with time. So I would say probably 5 years ago, if you would give me a Walt Disney,
Hmm.
I would kill it. Like
Yeah.
just like I already have another 5 years, of reefing experience, if not more.
Yeah.
But there's just certain things when you step up to the next level, unless you've really matured and a certain way, and your system has matured, this is where you may run into problems. So
Hmm.
back then it was that, for the longest time I couldn't keep torches.
Yeah.
Those were very hard for me, and for many reasons. Later on, I found out. So the latest one was, first it was like maybe some parameters that I was just not doing right, or flow or lighting. And then the last thing, like when I thought I dialed everything in, my torches started to die, and
Hmm.
I could not figure out for 2 months like what's going on. At the end, I found out it was my blue tang Dory that
Oh,
would come
yeah.
when I wasn't there, and he would just pick at it all the time, and they would just retract and do that, and I would be losing one after another, and I was just kind of going like, what is going on? Why I cannot keep a torch?
They have been my current one's not bad. But I have had prior ones too. Would pick up frags and drop them on other corals and basically
Yeah.
cause coral warfare. I was like,
Yes.
you punks. So
Yes.
that can definitely be an issue.
What about you? What's your coral nemesis?
Red planet. I don't know
Hmm.
why. I've tried it 5 or 6 times. It never does well in thrives. I don't know
Really?
why. Other millies perfectly fine. I have a Walt Disney in there. I have Orange Passion, all these other ones. Hellfire
Yeah.
millies. They're all fine. Red Planet never makes it. That being said, I haven't tried in probably like a year or so, but
Yeah.
historically, that was just one of those ones that was always my nemesis.
So what do you think happens? Because the simplest analogy, or that I have certainly experienced many times,
Mm,
when you start out fresh with a new tank, and let's say it's quickly cycled, whatnot, I find that, for example, in my experience, putting an anemone in is a lot uh, iffier than if you do it, say, 3 or 4 months into the tank. Just
mm.
well, so something changes. Like, is it a biofilm? Is it something else? So, what do you think adds to the maturity of the aquarium, where certain things that you wouldn't be able to keep, let's say, on day one or even month two,
Yep.
it's a completely different story 12 months from now?
Okay, so a couple different angles on this one.
Yes.
I think corals can quote unquote survive day one. I just don't think they'll necessarily thrive till it's a bit
Right.
more established.
Hmm.
Um, Anemones, I can't say I've ever had any weird issues with them in a new tank. Overall, they've been okay, but I do think it is more, like you said, like the biofilm and the bacteria.
Yes.
I think when they're settling onto stuff and it has that established, bacteria, biofilm, all that goodness, I think they're more receptive to kind of like growing and being happy there versus it
Yes.
not being there in a pristine, sterile tank. And,
Yep.
this is all my theory, but I think it's something along those lines. I don't know if we'll ever know 100%. But even frag plugs, you glue something on a fresh flag plug versus one that's been sitting in a tank for a while. Stuff seems to
Yes.
encrust better on the ones that are established. So
So you've named all those things, as you were doing this, that are specific to aquarium. But
yeah,
what about the things that are specific to the keeper of aquarium, such as yourself? Like, I mean, do we have individual blind spots where, like, I'm gonna pull my hair out, going, oh, like whatever I do with torches, like they always die for me, or the anemone or something like that. But you'll be like, oh no, I can put anemone on day one and it's totally fine. So is
I don't,
that
I
something
don't,
that we do differently?
I don't know if it's a reefer blind spot. Like I know over time, I definitely say, me 10 years ago starting a tank,
Yep.
everything wouldn't be successful. Where now I would throw stuff in a new tank and not even worry about it, and like, okay, most things will be fine. But I'm also like, I know tricks to up my success rate. Like for instance, on my new tank, I've been pre-cycling my rock for a month in a bin with a heater and a power head and some bacteria. I
Hmm.
have 3 liters of Cibrax living in my water box sump that I can put in the new sump to bring in some good stuff. Like there's all these like little things that you kind of like tricks will help accelerate a tank being happy. And I think as you progress, you keep doing these little tricks and keep adding on over time. So I think it's one of those things where you might not necessarily think too much about it. You just do it as you're more experienced reefer, where in the early days, you don't know these things. You don't really think about it. And I think a lot of that stuff helps, instant tank or be more successful. But like you said before, with like the torches, I mean, that was a fish. It's kind of hard to avoid that one. But like my red planet nemesis coral, that could just be that tank, right? Like I've had one tank where forest fire digi was happy, another tank when it wasn't. So I think some tanks just they have their nemesis. There's like one coral where the tank's just like, no,
I think it's the nemesis can be myself, for example, in a
yeah,
sense that everything, like the more I do this, the more I think about it, the more I get maybe surprised how anecdotal
mm-hmm.
everything is here, right? I mean, like certain things, especially when you started the hobby, you always look for somebody who's got an amazing aquarium, and you want to kind of follow in their footsteps. And a lot of times they'll give you a couple of pointers, like don't do this or do that, and then they'll
Mm-hmm.
stick with you, and you just always kind of try to stick with it. But there is no rhyme or reason to that necessarily. Like, how do you know that 2 months of cycling your rock is any better than 2 weeks or 6 months? Like, what is the scale there, for example?
More cycle, more better. I don't, I don't know if there
But
is a thing. More established, more diversity is probably the better thing. And I think that comes with time. I tend to be the person that will dump in random stuff and bacteria soup and try to introduce different stuff, and hopefully the good guys win and take over and the bad guys don't.
see, so I think so much about that. Like,
Yeah.
for example, let's take wild rock from Fiji, for example, which is
Hmm.
supposed to be the the end all be all because of diversity, which is great. But if you look at those rocks, like if you hold it in your hand, everybody says, "Oh, it's more porous," but how can it be more porous, for example, than the Cyperax that you've mentioned? And yet,
Hmm.
Fiji rock is coveted for like it's the best thing, and the rock that has been around for 1 year is inferior to the rock that's been around for 10 years, like the 10-year rock or 30-year rock. This is the one. So what's going on there? It's still a surface. There's maybe a few nooks and crannies in there, but the surface area is smaller than the Cyperax, and probably the bacteria that's there
Hmm.
after X number of months, it's probably going to stay the same. We
I
just don't
mean,
know.
I think we could throw a couple bags of Cyperax in Fiji and leave it there for a few months and take it and get the
Yeah,
same goodness, right? Like I
and
I know
nobody
people
has
that
done it.
well, I know people that have added, like I know Adam, I've talked to him about it before on Frag Garage,
Hmm.
where he's
Yeah,
he he's ordered live rock for customers and he's thrown
yeah,
some into the sump, and the tank just seems happier. Like that
yeah.
extra goodness seems to add something to your tank. I've been trying to
But
get some, but it seems impossible now. Or
but
like,
that is
yeah.
because like that makes sense because you bring in it's like people with the gut, right? Certain people have
Hmm.
certain level of bacteria in there. They've already kind of settled, and that's great to introduce because you have the diversity.
Yeah.
But what is the time scale to all of this? Like, is 2 months rock that you so for example, you take
Hmm.
the Cyperax, you drive to
Yep.
Fiji, you throw it in the water.
Yep.
Is this Cyperax, so same volume, for example, is it going to be as good as that rock in 2 months, in 2 years? Like everybody's going to tell you, no, no, you have to wait for 2 years. Why? Like what's going on there? Or maybe somebody will tell you it's
Leave it
impossible.
overnight and you're set.
That,
Um,
that's exactly right.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know. In my mind, a couple months, would be like the sweet spot to make sure, all the good stuff and
Yeah.
probably bad stuff is inoculates and gets us in through it. You leave it too long and those pores will probably clog up without enough flow. So
That's
there's probably depends on a few levels, right?
that's exactly right. So I think I got to bring up an article
Hmm.
from Reef Builders that I still have. I've been reading and rereading. It's the recent one. Have you seen the one on DOC?
No, but I'm gonna read
Uh,
it later now.
so it's I think they posted it last week. It's a long article. It's written like very scientifically, and
Hmm.
I don't remember what DOC stands for. Maybe somebody in the comments can say it's something about the probably solids, organic solids or compounds or something like that.
Dissolved
Dissolved
organic
organic.
carbon.
Yes, right. So uh, basically, the premise of the article, the way I understood it, is that over time, the like you always increase the DOC, unfortunately, and that's
Yeah.
what pisses off the corals. The corals don't like it, and the things
Hmm.
that increase it are food and aminos, which is
Hmm.
we love to dose.
Yeah.
So it's actually detrimental. The algae, so refugiums and a whole bunch of other things also
Really?
increase it. Yes, and there's a few other things. So the things that bring it down
Hmm.
are to a certain degree skimmer and some carbon.
Yeah.
Water changes is a big one,
Hmm.
and the other one is cryptic zones.
Hmm.
So I've been thinking so much about it because I actually I did call Adam like almost immediately, just kind of going, I need that Fiji rock because like maybe that's what I
Yeah.
should be doing. Like I've just set up the macroalgae, so Chedo, on my tank over here, just because
Hmm.
I want to add even more fish and I want to be
Yeah.
throwing as much food as I want. I want them to be as fat as possible, so I want to increase that. But if my algae is releasing the DOC,
Hmm.
maybe I should be instead
Well,
utilizing it with the crypto.
So why did they say the DOC was so bad? What was the argument?
Something about that's the reason for the bleaching and all
Mm.
the detriment of this. Like, this, the corals don't like it, and
Yeah,
also it was like it was about low nutrient and low DOC systems apparently are the best for the coral. But so
I have high
basically, it's something
nutrients.
about the disbalance and everything
Yeah.
else. Yes.
I laugh because you're saying that, and I just added a bunch of Chaeto to my system again and turned the Fuji back on because my nutrients are just creeping up way too high. And I never used to test or really care, but now that I have the Trident on there, I just realize how bad they are, and it makes me want to do better. So, you
Yeah.
know, yeah, I've already dropped from a week ago. It was like zero point 0.4 phosphates, which I'm like, ooh, that's up there. So I had 0.47, which is like way higher than I'd like. So I'm at like 0.31 as of this
Yeah.
afternoon, just from adding Chaeto and like a Refugium light back on again. So I was like, okay, I got to go back to this and like suck them up.
And it kind of harkens back to what I said earlier about, like, what are we always anecdotally chasing? Like, I mean, we've gone through the, oh, it's all
Everything.
about pH, right? So
Yeah.
everybody started to do this, and this is the factor, because we all yearn for some sort of like give us, some sort of a guideline, an answer, so that
Mm-hmm.
we can get to the promised land with all of this. And the problem is that we always kind of go with whatever it is, moonshiner, like, let's do every single one of them, or refugiums. And right now with the cryptic zone, that basically sets everything back, or the spiral, to where we were 15, 20 years ago. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe later on they'll say that the Berlin method, or the plenum, or those deep sand beds, this is the way to go. Like, I don't know.
I mean, at the same time, like that's the beauty of reefing, but there is so many different systems and so many different ways that work. And they all work, right? In different ways.
Yes.
Whether or not one's better, I think is still anecdotally. I don't think we have, for sure data on it. But which ones make those polyps extend and happy onto it?
Well, that's the thing. So I'm
Mhm.
just watching. My dog is getting on the counter in the kitchen, right next to the kitchen, and he knows not to do it. So this is this is me just looking after my dog.
Yeah.
Um, but for the polyp extension, like, what do you think then is the trigger? Like, I mean, what's your experience for when you see more polyp extension or less polyp
Well,
extension
let,
yourself?
let's let's start with what reduces polyp extension. If a coral
Okay.
is normally shaggy and it's no longer shaggy, like if something's happened,
Yes.
usually that's
Yes.
a sign it's angry, it's stressed, something's picking at it. That could
Yes.
be a fish nipping at it, crab crawling on it. It could be you have appearing flatworms or red bugs or something that's annoying the coral and retracting it.
Yes.
It could be improper flow. So there's a lot of things that could be annoying the coral or causing it to retract its polyps. And I think
Yes.
that's the first thing to look at, right? Go in there at night with a flashlight. Is there any pests on it? Is you see bite marks on it? Do you watch your fish from a distance? Is anyone picking at it? I think that's a good place to start for starting to troubleshoot why they're not out in the first place.
Hmm.
Um, as for kind of luring them out, feeding obviously can help. Depends on the coral. I haven't tried it yet, but the whole like bacteria soup feeding thing, I am a little bit curious to try that one day still. But
Yeah, it's beautiful. What's the name of it? There's the guy on Reef to Reef, who's done like 3 or 4 iterations of
yeah,
you concoction. It's the
Caleb, I think concoction. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. It's so you basically put it on a warmer, and then you do 24 hours, and you wear gloves, and you don't contaminate and everything else, which is kind of crazy, like, awesome, but
but
next
yeah,
level.
Polyp Lab has their polyp booster. Alcoforest
Yes.
has one. Like there is products that kind of entice the polyps out, and I don't know if that's just amino acids or what it is, but it's something that kind of like lures them out a little bit.
Hold on, not necessarily, because if I recall, and I've used
Mhm.
a few of those products, sometimes it's not the polyps that come out. It's kind of starts to get like a slimy stuff off of the rest of the body of the coral. So
Mhm.
it's not the polyps that get excited. It starts to shed something, and then, is that a good thing or a bad thing? There, so, buddy,
Well,
great.
well, I think when they shed and they do stuff, or they're releasing slime.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's good or bad, but I do think if that's happening, you need enough flow to help it get rid of it and deal with it in order for
Hmm.
it to be happy. Whether or not that's a normal good thing, bad thing, I don't know. I'm not sure on that one. Alan Vo, yeah, that was his name. Thanks for that, Matt.
Alan, yes,
Yeah.
that's correct. So, and his father is into reefing as well. Like, I mean, a great guy. Like, I really
Hmm.
enjoyed that podcast
Yeah.
with him.
Okay, Richard did that one. Establish biome heavy feeding while maintaining steady water parameters achieves this, and your polyps hang out if no pests or nippers appear. Yeah, so I mean that is one of the biggest things too, is having making sure nothing's picking at it, nothing's nipping at it. I know, even not really an SPS, but one of my gorgonians, my Red Sea sailfin, he always nips at that thing, and it pulls the polyps in, and 5 minutes later they come back out again. It's like a constant thing, but just if someone's picking at it, your coral's going to suck those back in.
Now, do you think low nutrients are more likely to draw the polyps out because the polyps want to grab something, or it's the higher nutrient, like lots of stuff in there, and it's eating all the time? Like, what are the which school of thought is better? Because I don't know.
I lean more towards more nutrients in the water. Nutrients are food to the corals in my mind, and if you look at the ocean with like the coral stone, everything, they have a constant flow of little snacks they can grab whenever they're hungry, and I think that keeps the polyps out more. I think if it's too pristine and there's not enough stuff in the water, I feel like they're probably less likely to have the polyps out. But I've always been on the more nutrient heavy side. I've never really been on the no nutrients camp.
Right. No,
What?
I agree. But by the way,
Yeah.
let's qualify it. Like, we're
Yeah.
most of the time right now we're talking about Acropora here, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't talk about the LPS per se and the Duncans and all of the world, right? Because that's a whole
They always
other
have their polyps out though.
game. Yes.
And if they don't,
Um,
then they're not happy campers on a big level.
But lately, like, I mean, one thing that kind of came to me this year was I was visiting a buddy of mine who has UV on his tank. And
Mm-hmm.
I think his tank, like with UV, I find that people can run the systems a lot lower nutrients
Mm-hmm.
and still good because you can kind of feed it and extract a lot more out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And his polyp extensions were phenomenal. Like, some of the corals that I gave him that had, okay polyp extension in my tank were way longer in his.
Is
And
that a
like,
bugger? You're like, why does it look way better in your tank than mine?
it certainly crossed my mind. I'm like,
Yep.
why is that? And I noticed that a lot of reefers out there, they use UV. I don't really use UV. I've never really used it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious if it's an important factor that adds to this.
I don't know if I've seen a big difference using it or not using it. Mine's been on the past week or so, more just because I want to clean my glass less, but not necessarily that I've noticed a big difference aside from that.
Yeah. Which let's just qualify, how big is the UV? Because there is like the 9 watt UVs, and then there's like 50
50,
watt UVs.
yeah,
Oh,
57
really?
watt, 57 watt
Okay.
on 200-ish gallons.
And and you've been running those things before as well, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
no,
so.
it's been on there for a couple of years. I kind of go in waves where I'll use it for a while, and I don't use it for months and months, and I'll use it for a bit. Then
And what do you notice when you don't use it? I'm very curious.
nothing massive, which is why I don't use it all the time.
Hmm.
My whole thing right now is I know my glass I clean it a lot more often because my nutrients are a little more elevated lately. And I'm like,
Right.
okay, if I run, because I also run ozone, right? If I didn't run ozone, then there would be water clarity benefits to the UV. But with the ozone, it's already removing a lot of those organic pigments from the water.
So
But
that
yeah,
article did mention ozone as one of the factors to bring the DOC down.
okay,
Just so you know.
yeah. So I am a big fan of ozone on multiple levels. Do you use ozone at all?
I never have. I have it. I've only used it in a cold plunge, but that's a whole other
Yeah, that's fair.
thing. So do tell, because I was always intimidated. Like, I've never, in 15 years of keeping reefs, I've never
Yep.
used a calcium reactor.
Really?
Um, yes, and I've had over 20 different aquariums. I was always intimidated on day one with them, and then like after that, I've done
Okay.
3 part and the calc wasser and all that stuff, and then I've never used an ozone, and
Hmm.
I'm really curious what your thoughts are on ozone.
Okay, yeah. So uh sorry, in the chat, what ORP do I run? My current
Ooh,
ORP,
ooh, that's a very good question.
at this second in time is 376. My high of last night was 413.
Oh wow, like mine is at like 230.
But I have UV and ozone on my tank, which both will affect it. So or ozone will raise your ORP. I don't really care what the number is as long as it's not too high. I just more use it for the trends. Now I have
Okay,
mine shut off. I believe it's 410 or 420 that it will shut off the ozone if it reaches that. I
okay,
primarily use ozone for water clarity because it is magical for the clarity, especially when you're looking down 6 feet of water. You
really? Okay,
crystal clear end to end, like once your ozone kicks in, like it's magical. If you have that in a filter roller, it's like your fish are floating once your glass is clean. Like it's wonderful. So that's the
okay.
primary reason I use it. But other benefits, it breaks down those organics in your water, so it gets rid of all the yellowing. You're gonna get more par. Your water is gonna look more clear.
Yeah.
Um, on a small tank, I wouldn't worry about it, but on a longer system, you notice it more. So the more water you're looking through, the better.
So
Uh,
how big is the ozone unit, and how do you plumb it in, kind of thing?
I have the Poseidon 200. I'm probably only running it at 30% maybe,
Mm-hmm.
and it's plumbed into my skimmer air intake. So my skimmer is acting as my ozone reactor, and it
Okay.
works very well to that. Is that couple
Really?
questions? Yeah. So a
Yeah.
couple questions. Is ozone expensive to start as far as equipment? Okay. You can buy a $50 China ozone generator. You can spend $200 on a nice Poseidon one. They're both going to work. The cheap China ones are going to require a little more love and maintenance because they usually have these little flat plates that can get clogged up fairly easy. Something like the Poseidon has a nice big tube. It's obviously better built from that perspective. You can replace it if it dies, some parts. So different perspectives. If you live somewhere very humid, it is a good idea to run an air dryer on it. I don't run one. I did run one for quite a while, just using the silica beads. It became a pain in the butt to recharge the beads every like 2 weeks, so I kind of eventually quit using it. But if your air is too humid over time, you can build up nitric acid. I think it's called nitric acid inside of it, which you don't really want to dose to your tank. So that where the air dryer prevents that. Now this is only if you're super humid. They do sell air dryers. They're freaking expensive, which is why I haven't got one because you can buy a kitchen freaking oven for the price of this dinky little bead dryer.
Yeah.
So which is kind of ridiculous. But so one day I'll probably get one, but it's been very low on the priority list because it's kind of hard to justify that.
And how often do you need to? What kind of maintenance do you need to do on this thing? Like other than those beads, if
Yeah,
you were to do that.
because I don't do the beads,
Yeah.
just as preventative of if that nitric acid or it builds up over time, I just rinse it out like probably once every 6 months. Just flush a bit of RODI through it and just air compressor, dry it out, and then hook it back up. It's pretty easy.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I think you're starting a trend for 2024. It could be the ReefDudes thing. Like let's show them with the pH stuff and everything else.
Yep.
Let's bring the ORP up, and
Yep.
let's bring it back.
Yeah. So I mean, if you have a 2 or 3 foot tank, don't worry about it. If you're
Yeah.
pushing, 4, 5, 6, 4 feet, I don't know. I have a second ozone, so I'll probably put it on my new tank. But I don't know if I need it at 4 feet. But 5, 6 foot larger tanks, you definitely notice a difference.
Well, this pup is 7 feet long, so
You would
I
know,
might as well just do that. So.
you would notice a big difference. I think you would appreciate the amazing water clarity, especially when you first see it.
You know what I recently did when I was kind of contemplating about the pH. I tried a few things, and
Yeah.
on Worldwide Corals, they interviewed one guy. Like all the tanks that they do interviews on, like I mean, they're
Hmm.
all exceptional, like and so different, right? I mean, like
Yeah.
everybody's got a completely different personality, both the person and the tank. And there was
Hmm.
one gentleman. He used a Sumps, skimmers power head, so the
Yeah.
one with the needle wheel impeller, and you would just plumb it to the air tube, and you would run it outside. And I
Yeah.
actually did that. So I
Yeah.
put it in there, and it's crazy how much foam. Like my whole sump become like a little skimmer in of itself.
Just from outside air.
Um, so, yeah, I ran it outside. Like I
Yeah.
made a whole like the whole thing. So and I must say, other than like it looks phenomenal and you feel great by looking at it, like because it's exceptional. Like I'm thinking, like my fish are now gonna get the best oxygen ever. I
Yeah.
didn't notice any difference to anything at all. So I'm now wondering, like, if it's doing anything or not. But maybe I should hook it up to like ozone or something. I don't know.
Yeah. So for outside air for me, if you have higher CO2 concentration in your house and around your tank, it
Yeah,
will help boost your pH by
yeah,
injecting lower
yeah,
CO2 air into the system. So that's like the main reason I did it way back
yeah.
when. Here, I just emailed myself a quick picture that I snapped yesterday. Give me one sec to load it up in here.
Nice.
Um,
I think you're right on about the CO2, by the way. Like this is, I know, I did a video on this. I think you talked about it many times, but still a lot of people don't actually know what the CO2 is in their house.
mhm.
I think it's super, super important to have because there's no magic to the pH rising. Like, I mean, I'm always very careful with my CO2 in the house. And most of the time it's just a little bit higher than outside.
Yeah, so then running the outside airline isn't going to give you a ton of benefit then at that point, in
Correct.
my opinion. Okay,
Yeah.
so just a quick photo. I just want to pull it for a second. So this is
Yep.
just a quick cell phone snap that I took earlier today,
Woo.
and you can see this is
Nice.
looking six. This is just a quick cell phone as I walk by. This looking 6 foot down the tank. Like you can see
Oh,
the
yeah.
orbit 4 at the overflow. Like the photo doesn't do it justice, but you can see crystal clear tons of detail on it. And this is looking through 6 feet of water. So that's kind of one of the bigger benefits of ozone is just that clarity you get through the water is kind of like one of the biggest things.
Okay, so you clearly like it,
Yes,
no
I'm a
pun
fan.
intended. But what about the fish? Well, fish probably don't care. But what about the corals? Do you think the corals? This is the dog right there, the one
Yeah,
that's
that's
doing
all
this.
good.
Uh, do you think the coral like that, or do they want those little particles, as you were saying? They want those things to be latching onto all the time. Like, I mean, and
That's
now you're robbing them off of it.
Well, that's a big thing that I debate all the time. So the ozone isn't necessarily going to break down the small microparticles floating. It's
Yeah.
going to break down like the organics and the yellowing in the water. I think your skimmer is going to be pulling out both. Your filter socks, your filter rollers, that's the stuff pulling out those little teeny particles.
I
And
see.
I debate that. And then I'm on the fence. I've been on the new tank. I was like, oh, should I try running like no filter socks, no mechanical filtration for a while? I don't know.
I
So
don't, by the way.
yeah. So I'm debating that and to see like how the water looks after a while, just because I'm going to be very milli heavy. Or it's like, okay, if I try having that extra stuff in the water to feed it, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how clear the water is and everything else with and without it. Do you have any
I,
clarity issues or anything with that?
you know what? I I don't really. I stopped caring about the clarity per se. Like, I mean,
Hmm.
I've never. Whenever I do a bucket test, for example, I've never seen any yellowing.
Yeah.
But mind you, I do large water changes. I believe in water changes, and this is kind of my primary mode of solution is dilution, right?
Yeah.
Having said that, I haven't used phosphate removers in probably 10 plus years. Like, I mean, I almost never use them, and every time I use them I only saw issues with that.
Hmm.
I haven't used carbon on any of my systems in probably years,
Yeah.
if not a decade, other than when I know there's something wrong and I need to
Mm.
extract something, or I've done extra large fragging system, event,
Yeah.
whatever. And no mechanical filtration per se. Like those socks are
Hmm.
horrible. Like, they look pristine. Like when I got the water box system, like those socks and the holders and everything, they look amazing.
Yeah.
But every 3 days you need to go in and do that,
Yeah.
and it gets boring very very fast. The one that probably worked the best for me was, I make, and I do them on my website.
Hmm.
I sell them on my website. I make the filter for those socks. I have these filter floss holders, so they're about an inch deep,
Hmm.
and just circle that goes in, and then
Yeah.
I just cut out the filter floss and
Yeah.
I put it in.
Nice.
It's nice, level. It becomes brown in 3 days or so, and I just
Yeah.
toss it and I put another one, another one,
Hmm.
another one. Yeah.
I actually made something similar for my Nano just for when I would clean the glass and stuff. Every once in a while to capture all that stuff. It's like a little square that fits in there with just a bunch of
Yes.
slits that I could put
Yeah.
a little piece of filter pad on top and then
Yeah.
toss it out once it's done polishing. And I just use it like once a week type of thing. But yeah,
Yes.
oh, that's a good way to do it. I like it.
That's
Um,
that's good.
Yeah, so with yours, if you use the Ozone, like I don't know, you'll be amazed at the difference if you've never used it. So it kind of replaces the need for carbon to a certain
Hmm.
extent because carbon absorbs organics. This breaks down organics. Carbon helps get rid of the funky smells out of a tank. Ozone breaks down the stuff that makes a smell. So it does. There's a lot of overlap. So I don't really use carbon since I've been using Ozone. Again, unless something drastic happens. But even if there's coral warfare, right, it's going to help break down those toxins the corals are releasing. So it does a lot of overlap with what carbon does. At least similar outcome, but a different way
Yeah.
of doing it. So there's definitely
So,
a lot
so
of
let me ask you this: what now that you're starting a new tank? What are your how you want to tackle it this time around? Like, what would be your first vision for the tank and the filtration and
yeah.
the equipment kind of thing? So on this one.
This is a good question. I've been thinking about this. So the rock I've obviously like pre-cycled as much as I can.
Hmm.
I'm on the fence if I'm going to put a filter roller on it or not. I might start it without and then decide later on that one. So same thing. I
Hmm.
might try running nothing for a little while, and maybe we'll run socks for the first week until the sand's all clear, and then maybe run nothing for a bit. I'll probably throw a few little frags in there from the beginning and just see how they do.
Hmm.
A couple ones that, of course, I'm gonna put nice corals in to start. But like I have Orange Passion, which is growing very well, super pulpy in my tank. Like I'm gonna throw a frag in that in there from the beginning, see how it does. And if it
Really?
grows well, sweet. It just more time to encrust and turn to a big beautiful colony. So I don't know. I should start with
Yeah.
like some whatever coral, but I'm probably gonna put ones I eventually want in there anyways.
You're a brave man.
Yep.
I know some hobbyists give a really good point about watching for coral and algae. Like, I mean,
Hmm.
once you start seeing coral and algae, this is when you can introduce like the higher end corals kind
Yep.
of thing. So, but you never know. Maybe orange passion will react just fine.
Yeah. What I also used to do to introduce Coraline, the early days, I'd go pick up some like snail shells or something from the LFS with encrusting Coraline and go rub it all over my rocks so that it would spread it. Because Coraline doesn't come out of the thin air, right? It has to be introduced. So I'd do
Yes,
that
yeah,
and then go rub it all over the rocks, and those little bits will eventually start growing.
that's true. Yeah, this is I've done that before. It
Yeah.
works very very well.
But again, Coraline's a double-edged sword, right? Part of me is like, okay, do I want to introduce it? Then it just means more cleaning of the power heads, more cleaning of the glass. It's probably good for your reef at the end of the day. But these are like the stupid little things that always run through my head. It's like,
Yeah.
well, it's more effort to clean everything once it's in there, once it's caking on all your stuff, but trade off. In the chat, Alyssa, would it be a problem running Ozone 24/7? You could run a very low amount constantly. Personally, I run mine in the middle of the night when you're not around. So if you run too much ozone and it doesn't fully get dissolved, it can release some, and ozone's not the best for you. You don't really want to be breathing that in. So what you can do is you can just put a carbon pad or carbon on top of your skimmer so the vents kind of absorb it. That is what you could do. I run a low amount so it doesn't really have excess, and I also run it in the middle of the night when no one's around. It has a very short half-life, so it does dissipate fairly quickly. So in my mind, that just removes a lot of the risk of anything without having consumables to pay for. That's my strategy. Hey, Haley.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's a good way to do it. Yeah, soggy bearded reefer. 650 potassium is on the line of if you push it too high, there could be issues for fish and other stuff. So in my mind, that's pretty dang high. I would probably do a larger water change myself to knock it down a bit. And whatever you're dosing to up it, like cut that way back.
Couldn't agree more.
Yep.
Potassium is beautiful until it's not.
Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, there's definitely higher potassium. That's a good one. It can bring out a certain like I don't want to say shimmer or glow or vibrance to corals. Like there's some nice effects of elevated potassium, but too much can definitely be trouble. in my experience. Do, 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 do. Sorry, I'm just skimming the chat. If you
No,
guys had any questions that we didn't answer, feel free to
I'll,
just re-ask them, because there probably was lots. So, as for, you did mention something about the whatchamacallits, like the polyp booster type of products.
yes.
What is your experience with those? Do they work? Are they worth it?
So the Polyp Booster one was probably the first one that I tried where I saw that reaction in
Mm-hmm.
on the corals, but I
Yeah.
didn't witness the reaction of the polyps extending. I witnessed the reaction of that shedding,
Mm-hmm.
which is considered to be a feeding response on those things. So I did see this. I did see it. I want to say when I started using it, for some reason lately, when I've been on a kick of Polyp Extension, I've tried every single fluid there is available out there, and
Mm-hmm.
I've not seen a single one where I would feed it and then the polyps would come out. I've not
Yeah.
seen it at all. I also don't necessarily see things come out at night. Now
Mm-hmm.
I'm usually asleep at night, so I don't really go there. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't get those things. Like, I mean, Alan with the concoction, he's basically saying this. I'm very impressed with Ronaldo or at Pirates Reef.
Yeah.
Or yes, like the polar extensions are phenomenal. And when I talked to him a few times, he's basically saying that it's he let the corals react to all the food that you throw in there, and this is how it expands. There's also
Mm-hmm.
Mines, same idea.
Yep.
Like it's very smelly. I can see
Yes, it
how it
is.
would trigger
Yeah.
that response, but I, for whatever reason, have not really seen it as much.
Okay. Have you tried carbon dosing for it? Richard mentioned in the chat. I thought this was kind of interesting. With a few months back, I had Tropic Marin Lou on, and
Hmm.
basically talking about how a lot of his carbon dosing products are more about basically getting the bacteria, like feeding the bacteria, which feeds the corals indirectly.
Yes.
So you're feeding the corals
Yes.
bacteria. Yeah, at the end of the day. And that is a method to kind of almost bring out polyps and keep happier corals in a sense. Have you done any of those methods or?
No, but that buddy of mine that I went to that had those polyp extensions, he's a big fan of the carbon dosing, and
Mhm.
as a matter of fact, maybe that's actually why he had them. I think I'm a little bit stuck in some ways, just because I don't know if I want to introduce even more variables and more things that I cannot even see per se. I'm just kind of guessing. This just kind of comes back to what we were talking before, where like, do you think that the bucket with the live rock a month after, like a month or 3 months, there's a big difference?
Mhm.
And if yes, then why? Like those are the
Mhm.
things that that kind of a little bit freaks me out. And that article, the on the DOC, actually did mention that the carbon dosing will increase your DOC as well. So it's kind of, they are saying that it shouldn't. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'm opening that right now, so I remember to read later.
Yeah, no, it's
Mhm.
it's a great one. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Um,
perfect.
I will almost. So one of the podcasts that I've listened to, it was on Reef Bomb. It was Jason Fox, who's
Hmm.
I'm a huge fan. Like, I mean, for whatever reason, like I just really like Jason Fox, who appears to be like the guy. He's a choral whisperer that actually walks the talk, and like
Yeah,
he's like he lives this thing, right? I mean, like who else can go in the middle of the ocean for 12 hours? With some folks on like dinghy and like not sleep and do all of this just to get a few corals. Like, I mean, if that's not the next level, I don't know what is.
true
And
dedication.
yeah, and at the same time, like, I mean, he just said he just does very large water changes.
Hmm.
And I can tell you, like, when I actually started doing that on one of my aquariums, I've never has as good results than anything else.
So how with your corals,
Yes.
polyp happy, day before water change, day after water change, can you tell a difference in your corals?
I cannot answer this question because I do automatic water changes.
Okay, fair enough.
So I don't know.
That's
But
fair.
I would assume that they will be better. But it's been a while. Like I've
Yeah,
been running automatic water changes for over 10 years now, so
yeah,
I don't even know how it works otherwise.
fair
What
enough.
about you?
When I do a big water change, like a manual one, now keep in mind I also usually use this excuse to vacuum the sand bed at the same time, but the
Yes.
tank generally does look more happy, more vibrant, kind of the next day. Um, but that's partially because I cleaned the sand bed. But I also think that the tank in general looks happy. Maybe there's extra food from stirring up the sand bed that affects it, right? Like it's hard to know 100% with the water change, but I think it does more good than anything else. I also do automatic for the most part too, but every once in a while I do a manual just for good measure.
So I'll have a question for you. I actually
Yes.
shot a video today that I'll be posting today, tomorrow, but of a beautiful aquarium, and
Mm-hmm.
we were talking about the sump. And
Yeah.
in the sump, as you know, it doesn't matter what husbandry you have, you'll have the detritus. Like first, it's going to be like a little film, and then after a
Mm-hmm.
while, it's just going to be like this thick of this mulm or whatever
Yeah.
that is. And if you were to put in the power hat, you'd be surprised how dirty the whole water is, and like the whole tank will just get cloudy and all of that stuff.
Yep.
So the question I have is it better to leave that mulm undisturbed in the creek? Let's say I'm building a cryptic zone, so I've got a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of live rock, it's dark,
Yep.
and do I just not let the flow go through, and then that mulm like eventually is just going to be very thick, and then maybe sometimes I vacuum it?
Mm-hmm.
Or do I want to go like lay Jake Adams on it and just kind of do this deep cleaning of the sump all the
Yeah.
time, so that everything is just pristine there, but there is still microorganisms inside of that cryptic zone?
I personally, if you have issues with nutrients or pH,
Yeah,
I would vacuum out your carpet of Mullum.
yeah,
If you don't have any issues with that, I would worry about it less. And I do it periodically, but I wouldn't do it all the time. If you have that, layer of organics and Mullum and stuff building up there that can eat up or some of the oxygen out of the water and suppress your pH. So that's one reason I would. So
yes.
that's why I'm saying that. Just 'cause I know that can oddly. I had a massive conversation with Lou about this a while ago and how that can actually have a big effect on pH if you're fighting it. Um, so I thought that was interesting and it makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't
because
know.
it's organic, right?
Yeah.
It's a large organic body that's sucking things in.
Hmm.
But how is that different than if it's a bunch of, let's say, sponges
Yeah.
on the covering the rocks that still like all those microorganisms that do all of that stuff? Like those are
Well,
supposed to be
uh,
beneficial.
well, sponges clean your water, so
Yeah,
they're beneficial, right? Like they suck in
yeah,
water through it.
yeah.
So I think they're beneficial. That's the trade-off with the automatic water changes, because then you never do the manual ones and you rarely ever siphon out the stuff. It's much less frequently if you have automatic water
Yeah.
changes. But then again, you probably get more water changes from doing automatic water changes than you would manually, I'm assuming. At least
And
most of us lazy reefers.
late Jake Adams, I remember he hated sponges. Remember, he would always go in like, I mean, he didn't
Yeah,
want them anywhere, kind of thing.
I
And
don't mind
yet,
them.
we have Reef Wholesale here in Toronto,
Yeah.
and when I talked to Patrick there, one of the things that he loved about his system and was attributing his
Mm.
success to was that massive undisturbed just sheet of like phenomenal live rock that he had, that had those crazy sponges of every single color known to
Yeah.
man.
Yep. I think they're good for it. I mean, you could have a sump full of. I want to see someone do like a clam refugium one day or something. Just a bunch of those guys just sucking in the water, polishing it for you all day. I think that'd be
Well,
cool.
they wouldn't necessarily polish the water. They will be produced like
Well,
nitrate
they would
factories,
clean
right?
it.
So, sorry, sorry, you said the clams, not the.
Yeah.
I thought you said clowns. Sorry,
No,
that
no,
was
no,
my
no,
bad.
no, 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 no.
Okay,
Yes,
yes,
no,
the
nitrate
clams.
factor, yes. Because
So
clams, they filter a lot of water. Like they suck in a good
yes,
chunk of water. And if you
yes,
had, like a massive sump
I
chamber
agree.
just full of clams or mussels or anything like that, I think they would do like a good chunk of water filtering. I don't know. I think that'd be cool. Something I've
You
always thought
gotta
about but
talk
never done.
to Clam Mania owner. Like I mean, like in the states.
That's the problem. That imaginary line in the middle.
Yeah, so that's true.
I know. That's the
I
problem.
wish. I
But
wish. I wish.
I bet you'd have wicked water, like pristine for like nutrients and stuff. Because I think the clams would just be great.
Yes, yes. I'm a huge fan of the clams, and unfortunately, they've become so prohibitively expensive. They
Hmm.
weren't cheap, 15 years ago, but right now, like you're looking at $300-400 for a nice clam to start with, which is
Yep.
kind of insane. And
It
you look at it
wouldn't be a
funny
cheap
instead
refugium.
of diet. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Greg, that
Yeah.
sounds like a calcium reactor. I have a steady stream of water at a pH of 6.3. Why are my corals still growing? Because you have a calcium reactor keeping it stable and happy. That's why it's growing. Normal pH 7.7 to 7.9. When I didn't do anything to boost my pH and just had a calcium reactor,
Yeah.
it was at 7 something to 7.9. Like that was the normal range.
And
So
how were your corals when you were doing that?
they were fine. They were fine. Um, it's funny because like at a higher pH, stuff does seem to grow faster.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff does seem happier, but you do all this stuff to push it up there. And now, like my water box at the point where it's just annoying to try and fight that now because stuff almost grows too much.
Yes, the only solution to that is you only start keeping the high end corals, and then it's not a problem. Like technically,
Hmm.
so, like in theory, if you had your whole tank water box full of orange passion, you would love to have this problem or whatever it is. But for whatever reason, it never happens for anybody.
Yeah. So I don't know, like my orange passion is growing pretty happy in there and I do nothing special for it. So I'm
Oh,
hoping the
nice.
magic will continue to the new tank, but
How's the polyp extension on
it's
the
great.
orange passion? Oh
Great.
yeah,
Oh yeah. No,
very
it's good.
nice.
Do I have any photos? But yeah, it's
Cool.
yeah, no, it's been super happy and I've done at least not that I know of anything super special for it, but
Wow. That's
okay.
okay. And I guess a lot of times corals will be fine without, like, the corals can still, the acros can be healthy without
Mhm.
polyp extension
Yep.
a lot of times. But if the polyps are out there, that's definitely a big benefit for everybody,
So
including coral.
if you have something that's not so polypy, is there anything that you would do for kind of tricks or things to try and lure the polyps out or try and make it happier?
You know what? It almost never happened for me. Like I've
Mhm.
never seen it, and I also have this theory that, um, at least I've definitely observed it with the forest fire. So, which
Mhm.
is not an acro, but still. So when I was starting out this tank here, I would take the very healthy, beautiful, fully polyp extended forest fire. I'll bring it here, it will almost immediately close off. And if I were to take it back, it will open up in a couple of days and be back to its normal self. However, if I would leave it here for, say, 2 weeks or a month or whatnot, it would never come back to whatever it was, which it actually does make sense to me. Probably something happens and now it's the point of no return.
Mhm.
So that is kind of my way to answer the question that sometimes, who knows, maybe a certain coral, you are now doing everything correctly, and if I were to grab a new frag from you and your polyp extensions are great, it's going to look great and feel great in my tank. But if, let's say, something just went away astray in my tank, after a while it just can get to the point where, okay, I gave up, forget about my polyps, kind of thing. That's just a thought.
Yep. We'll have to trade a bunch of corals one day and we can compare long-term notes.
I like that. So
Yep.
unfortunately, we're too far. Like shipping would be very difficult, I think.
Yeah, you could overnight stuff. It's doable. Slightly expensive, but doable.
I looked up the other day because I've shipped to like Manitoba and Saskatchewan, but
Mhm.
when it gets to like, and obviously anywhere in the East Coast, but if when it comes to like shipping to British Columbia, I didn't get the shipping overnight. Like it was like closer to 30 hours or 36 hours, which was a little bit too much for me.
You have to do it on like an airplane on a flight, but that's like $100 to ship it. But
Yeah, yeah.
that is the
So
super quick way. I don't know, maybe worth it. You throw in $100, trade a bunch of stuff.
there we go. All right, it's a
Potential here.
for sure.
Um, Phil's asking, doesn't Dmitry have a flame angel? That's more likely the lack of polyp extension. Once my flame died, polyp extension came back.
Don't say that because now I'm gonna go look after. so um, maybe, but I don't have him in other tanks,
Mhm.
and I didn't really see him ever nip on anything. But it's a very valid point, and it could be also some other fish that you would not even expect. Like I mean, I
Yeah.
had a filefish that I think sometimes would try to nip, and even the blue tanks or things like that. But
Yep.
for me, that flame angel was, I think he was pretty decent.
Mhm. You have 2 blue tanks in your tank.
In this one, yes.
Yep.
So, and they're probably the most personable fish I've ever kept. Like, I mean, the
Nice.
big ones, once they grow out,
Yep.
they have amazing personality, almost like an Oscar in the freshwater.
Huh, that's pretty cool.
Mm.
Mine have mainly been punks and killing my coral. My current one's not bad. It's
Yeah.
probably one of my oldest fish that I inherited from a reefer shutting down a tank who had it for 10 years. I was probably
Hmm.
pushing 15, 16 now, but yeah, it's pretty cool.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yep. I had a flame angel in the past, and he definitely was a nipper. I have a coral beauty now in my water box, and he's pretty good. I think I've seen the odd little bit of stuff, but for the most part, he's behaved.
Very
It's
impressive.
Russian roulette with the dwarf angels.
Speaking of that, I just watched Deer Hunter over this weekend. Rewatched it again.
Yeah.
So, have you watched it?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's basically when you say Russian roulette, this is how it kind of all started.
Oh, really?
And yeah, so and it's got De Niro and Christopher
Hmm.
Walken in there. So not an easy necessarily movie, or not an uplifting movie, but definitely one that every person should watch. I think.
All right. I'll have to watch it one night. Okay. All right. So Phil, I'm trying to reread your comment. I never saw mine pick that much, but I only had polyp extension at night. Once it died, polyps came back the next day. Next day, never killed anything, just pissed off polyps. Yeah, fair. Secret nippers. Do you another one that amazed me is Aaron had, what are the angels with the big wispy things? Moorish idol.
Oh, Maury Channel,
Yeah,
yeah.
he had one of those with all his coral and surprisingly nipped at nothing. I figured those guys would be terrorists to corals, but yeah, it was supposedly great.
You know what? There is a thought though. Like I mean, there is an argument to be made to throw caution to the wind and just kind
Hmm.
of just go all in with the angels and just have as much coral that you can have, and then like some people do that and the tanks look phenomenal, or you like not a problem. They just not have enough time to go after every single polyp.
That's fair. And I think it's more of a problem for a younger tank too. If you only have little,
Yeah,
finger frags in your tank, it's pretty
yeah,
easy to annoy the whole coral. Or if you have big colonies, it might annoy one branch, where the rest of it's probably okay. It's enough to distribute it,
yes.
right? So no one's overly picked on. And I think that is definitely key. But yeah, for stunting polyp extension, that is a very, very good point.
I once had a pair of gold maroon clownfish
Hmm.
that I was just starting out with, and every time I would introduce one bubble tip anemone, it would die because they were pretty big, and they would just go in and start rubbing in it, and the anemone just couldn't take it because it just was too much. But when I introduced like four anemones and like bigger ones, they were able to
Yeah.
handle it because it would never go just for one. Like they go from one to another, and the other
Hmm.
one would kind of come back to life. So there you go.
Yeah. Nice. I have a Gawny in the tank beside me. The one clown keeps trying to host, and I'm surprised it's
Mm.
still so happy considering how much it annoys it. And then in the other
Yeah,
tank beside me, there's a green Japanese toadstool, and the clown's just laying in it right now, not even moving. Like he looks like he's not even alive. He's just like sideways, upside down, laying in this toadstool. It cracks me up.
that's nice.
Personalities of our fish, eh?
Yeah.
Beauty. Do. Anything else you can think of that we haven't touched on for polyps? We'll start with the acro side. Anything on the acro side you think we skipped over or didn't hit?
No, you know what? Like I actually thought we went pretty deep
Yep.
on that, and I think we've touched upon every one of those items. I'm hoping that, especially not only folks that are currently watching us, but the
Mhm.
ones that will be watching, rewatching those things, if they add to the commentary and maybe share their experience on this. But I find that for me, it's very important, and always chasing it,
Mhm.
and it's almost like within my grasp, but not quite there. So, which
Yep.
makes it even more challenging, which I
Keeps
like.
the hobby fun. Okay.
Yeah.
So we've kind of covered acro. So how about this one? For LPS,
Yes.
primarily like Gonioporas, Alveoporas. Do you keep those? Do you have those at all?
I have some. I have gonies.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a beautiful red one that I have
Nice.
there. So I would say probably other than the flow, which I think
Mm-hmm.
is the like lighting is not a big deal in my opinion for those things, but the flow is huge,
Mm-hmm.
obviously because you want to find that kind of range.
Yep.
But the number one thing in my opinion is the quality of the original piece that came to you, because a lot of times it may be even opened up at the store or whatever, but if it's been compromised somehow,
Mm-hmm.
it has a pest living in it or whatever, you are doomed to see it become frail and die. And sometimes it can be 3 4 months, like when you won't
Yeah.
even know, and you just it's stacked against you kind of thing. What
You
about
know,
you? Like, what are your thoughts?
I kind of agree on that one actually because I added a bunch and I lost an Alveopora in here.
Yeah.
And same thing, it very well just could have been something very from the start. And I know a few of the Gonis I brought in from my other tank, 100% happy, polypy, they've been established, they're good. Most were fine. But there
Yeah.
was one I lost and another one was kind of like iffy. But yeah, so the quality of it, 100%. Was it freshly fragged? How tank hardened, I guess, was it to an extent?
Yes.
It's always been one of those tricky ones where if you get them or they don't have the polyps out, but trying to recover them, revive them, get the polyps out, get it eating again can be tricky at times.
Yeah, people do like iodine dips and a whole bunch of
Mm,
other things, but it's a lot easier to start with just like something that's high quality and healthy.
yeah,
It makes it much easier.
I agree. But you don't always know that, so that's the wild card, right? You don't always know
Yep,
where it's coming from. You just, especially over online somewhere from a photo, it's
I
hard
agree.
to know 100%. OA, I think that's oxalic acid. That's a koi pond type medication stuff, somewhat used dipped. I'm assuming that's what you're talking about. I haven't personally tried it, but it's supposedly a bit of a more gentler version of the antibiotics treatment or
Yep.
dipping. Have you ever used it?
No, no,
Yeah.
I try to always think about my aquarium as like I want to be able to always know that I can pick up any fish, throw it
Mm-hmm.
on a pan, and eat it. Like I've never done it, but for
Just
whatever
just in case
reason,
the world goes to crap and you got to do what you got to
that's
do.
yes. So that's why I'm setting up those tanks right there. So,
Yeah.
but like I always want to know that I haven't introduced a single thing, and so far so good. So yes.
Nope. Nope. That's probably for the better. End of the world survival plan. Have big fat fish.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Any dips for Gonis to revive them? Yeah, sorry, the oxalic acid, what ReefDudes mentioned above. I'm assuming that's what he means with OA. That one has potential. I've also tried, just dipping them with some, heavy amino acids or particulate foods and
yes.
basically stuff to just essentially try and get them to come out and eat or force them in food for a little bit.
The
Okay, there you
one
go.
I sorry, the one that I have problems with is antibiotics. Like I
Hmm.
know that a lot of people do those baths and things like that, and like, and then guess where the water is gonna go after that? Put it into the drain, and then it goes into your civic system and whatnot, and like that's just nuts to me. Like I don't know
Yeah.
why we're doing that. Like nothing is worth doing that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I have mixed opinions on it. And the one thing that always makes me wonder too is I keep hearing this stat that essentially when people take it, most of it they just pee it out and it does the same thing. Like so
Yes,
much of it just goes straight through you. So I'm like,
yes.
so I don't think it's just us. I think it's everything. But yeah.
Agreed, agreed. So yes,
Hmm.
MRSA.
Yep.
Just one word. So there you go.
There you go. I'm trying Euro style, no antibiotics. There you go.
There you go. So yes.
PNC bio. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good. Hey, they're good ones to look at because they can't get that stuff over there, so they have to find other methods,
Yes.
which is good. So
Yes.
more natural is usually one of the better routes. Well, I think it was a good random rabbit hole today, Dmitry. Appreciate you
Thank you.
joining me today.
All
If
right.
you guys want to learn more, be sure to check out Treasure Coils. I do have some of his links in the description below. And yeah, if you guys enjoyed today, be sure to that like button. If you're new, make sure you subscribe. Check out the links below. And yeah, we'll see you guys on next week's live stream. Thanks, guys.
Cheers. I had fun. Thanks, Dan.
You too. Thank you.